Hello all, hope you're doing well today. So as many of you may well be aware, last night the BBC decided to do an immigration special of its flagship political show Question Time. For any international viewers, Question Time is basically a show where supposedly members of the public can ask leading politicians questions, but many of us have suspected for a long time that it's deeply fixed and it's really just a tool of liberal propaganda. Now, the typical dynamic you see in Question Time was very much in play in last night's episode as well. You have one figure who leans to the right and he's unpopular throughout, smatterings of applause when he makes his points, and everyone else is basically pro the liberal regime to varying degrees of leftism. They get vacuous applause when they make a cliched tawdry point. Now, in the Blairite era, which the BBC very much still is, you could get away with this sort of thing because Blairism was so culturally and politically dominant. But as you can see from this latest poll here, estimating seats in the next general election, Reform are absolutely smashing it. So you'd expect them to be quite popular when you actually speak to the public, but on the BBC, they suspiciously never are. We can also see the propaganda at play when 4 of the 5 guests are from parties who are pro-mass immigration, especially the Conservatives. They, of course, soar over the Boris wave. The only person who's on the anti-immigrant side is from an immigrant background himself. On a side note, it's my view that this is why Farage was so desperate not to lose Zia Youssef around a year ago. He knows in the modern liberal media environment you can't say anything anti-immigration if you don't have a minority next to you. Otherwise you'll just be seen as Hitler and evil and the rest of it. But what we've explored so far is pretty basic propaganda for BBC Question Time. But yesterday, boy did they outdo themselves. Have a look at this.
You came over on a small boat. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
What's your response to what you're hearing? Because obviously everyone is talking about people like you.
Well, let me say something first. I just want to clear that leaving the convention doesn't just affect the migrants. It would give ordinary people one less court to protect their rights. Even for weekend checks and the government power, risk on peace settlement in Northern Ireland and damage our security cooperation.
They actually got an illegal immigrant, told him what to say about the ECHR, as if people from the third world even know what the ECHR is, and expect us to buy this shit. I mean, outrageous subversion aside, this has to go down as one of the great BBC propaganda moments. I mean, look at this. People on Twitter today are pointing out that he couldn't even learn his lines. He had a freaking earpiece in. Dear Lord, this is just too good to be true. What I love about this is how obviously it's so see-through, but it fulfills every single coordinate of the liberal wet dream. These liberals in their trendy all-white enclaves love to think of the third world migrant as just as liberal as them, so desperate to come over here to celebrate Van Gogh, Owen Jones and Pride marches, and yes, they're so enthralled of the European Court of Human Rights regulations. I mean, the implication is that these boat migrants are supposedly coming over here concerned about the human rights of the Europeans. I mean, it's iniquitous on part of the BBC, but absolutely brilliant for a laugh. I must say, my sympathy for migrants is at an all-time low. However, I do feel a scrap of empathy for this guy. Can you imagine what they told him to get him to do this? Yeah, once you say this, Ahmed, everything will be fixed and you'll be able to stay in the country and live happily forever. And but, oh, wonderful, Miss Fiona Burrows. When complete, I get to go home with you and stay in your bed? No, Ahmed, no. You'll have to learn the longer you're in this country. I'm an elite, so you don't talk to people like me. Now back to the compound and mix with the rubes, the bigots where you can be free. Anyway, new starlet of the left wing, the shouty, yelly arm, flailing-y Zach Polanski was on the show, doing his typical thing. Everyone's racist and fascist and so on, so vote for the Green Party. He actually got shown up by Rory Stewart, of all people, recently when he was on The Rest Is Politics. He confused the deficit with the debt payments, which shows how seriously he thinks about the world. But we should remember, he's not there to think seriously about the world. He's there to convince people they're evil if they want controls on immigration. But believe it or not, as unbearable as Zach Polanski is, he may have actually been outwankered by the Liberal Democrat's Daisy Cooper. What do you think she puts the small boat crisis down to?
46,000 a year. And do you know why? It was because of the botched Brexit deal pushed through by Boris Johnson, championed by Nigel Farage.
Yeah, you hear that vacuous applause when a cliche, tawdry left-wing point is made. It's highly suspicious, especially in Dover, which is bearing the brunt of the illegal immigration crisis. It votes right-wing. And further to that, when it came to Brexit itself, 2/3 of people voted for it. I mean, the equivalent is someone like me going to Jeremy Corbyn's constituency in Islington and saying, I want to return to traditional conservative Christian values and I want to enforce remigration, and getting vacuous applause. It would seem a bit off, right? But anyway, Daisy Cooper really is the lowest of the low. Either that or she's just stupid. She also made the case as to why all of the migrants coming here are men is because, well, they're just so gentlemanly and concerned about their families back home.
And doing something which I believe fundamentally is really un-British. Now, on the question about men coming here, I mean, this is just a straightforward fact. The reason why men often arrive in the UK on their own is because the journey is just too dangerous for women and children. When women and children go on that journey, when they're leaving a place of war and persecution, they can be subject to rape, kidnap, trafficking and slavery, and therefore often men come in advance in order the family can follow them, and that's documented by migration groups.
Yeah, when she says migration groups, she means agitative, radical, left-wing, subversive organisations. Not to mention, this is so typical of liberal women, they have to concoct a narrative to be able to bear the brutality of reality, because you may have noticed her point of view is completely illogical. If these people are escaping war zones and brutality, why would they leave women and children there? I mean, her argument is these people have to leave war zones because they're being brutalised, but they're frightened they're going to be brutalised on the trip out of a war zone where they're being brutalised already. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, any decent man would not leave his wife and child behind if they were getting brutalised there. But again, it's not about logic, it's about liberal propaganda. Now, this leads us to a major problem in modernity where we have hordes of Western liberal women who've had their motherly instincts manipulated and pushed towards migrants and whatever victim group there is this week. To be clear, I don't hate women like Daisy Cooper. I think it's an absolute tragedy that what they think they're fighting for is some sort of justice and compassion. What they're really doing is destroying the West from the very foundations. This is made especially stark given we've had some revelations coming out from the grooming gangs recently, from some of the sentencing remarks. These are absolutely harrowing, and the liberal establishment has completely ignored it, and now we know why. What's so notable about all of this isn't just the nature of these crimes and their brutality, but also how there's a clear racial animus towards white people. That's why the powers that be don't want us to know what went on. I will be seen as the problem simply for saying what's happened here that they don't want you to know. Prepare yourself. Young and vulnerable girls, as Person B said, when I started seeing Zaf, he knew my real age. He would want a blowjob, handjob and sex. And he said, we're here to F all the white girls and F the government. We're over here to breed. We are going to take over. We've learned that there was a racial dimension to this before via court documents as well. This is quoting from one report. Again, one could point to any number of these cases, but consider the Rochdale rape gang sentence in 2012, whose vile leader, Shabir Ahmed, notoriously shouted out in court, "We are the supreme race, not these white bastards." The racial element of these crimes, need it be said, was clear as day. Quote, "All of you treated them as though they were worthless beyond all respect," said the judge, adding that one of the factors that led to that was that they were not of your community or religion. Yet police, prosecutors and politicians stubbornly insisted that race had not been a factor in the crimes. Quote, "I don't think it's particular race or religion," said Labour MP Keith Vaz. "It's totally wrong to say that it is." The harsh truth is, under the Liberal regime, we'll never truly know the true extent and the true horror of what happened with these gangs. Even when the Labour Party pretend they're interested, the case falls apart because they're riddling it full of bias. The person, Jess Phillips, who has the role of safeguarding women and girls, won't look into it properly because, again, it doesn't suit her narrative. As a good person, She knows only the white Western male is bad. So while we've been waiting for decades for justice on that front, when it comes to your public social media posts, according to Rupert Lowe, he's found out the government is storing all of our communications and then running AI through them to see if you said anything controversial. We all know what this is for. Given David Lammy is scrapping juries, it means they'll be able to basically arrest people who are thought criminals against the regime that they don't like with a click of their fingers. Oh, and by the way, according to Lowe, they're scanning all posts, especially for comments on migration. Now, when you put all of this together, question time, the grooming gangs, AI monitoring all of our posts, to my mind, it's undeniable that we are in the middle of a liberal regime coup. We can't really labour under the illusion that they give two hoots about democracy or popular sentiment. Personally, I've come to the conclusion that when they say democracy, what they mean is what the liberal regime wants to happen. It's something of a fantasy in any meaningful sense. This is why I also believe that reform can't really do that much should they get in, because the problem is systemic. It's as if the whole system needs to crumble and fall in on its own hypocrisy. Only then can we really start to rebuild something real from the roots up. It's going to be decades long, a marathon, very hard, lots of chaos involved, but a new tomorrow can come. This is why I believe the best thing we can do right now is become invested in the tradition, the history of your own country, its politics, its philosophy, its spirituality, that of the wider continent, of Europe itself, of the Western esoteric core. I think this is going to be vital in the future for any sort of reawakening. If you're interested in that, do check out the sister channels and the Substack and the rest of it. Do let me know your thoughts below, and do subscribe to this channel if you're new. Take care.